Right now, not 100 years ago, not in some dusty expedition diary. Right now, machines are picking up something underneath the most photographed ruins on Earth that nobody can explain. Empty space, hollow chambers, sealed for over 500 years. And here's the part that should bother you. Nobody has opened them. Nobody knows what's inside. The people who study this place professionally, the ones who've spent their careers there, are choosing not to dig. Not because they're not curious, because they're afraid of what breaking the ground might do to a mountain that's already cracked in two places beneath their feet. So let me ask you something before we go any further. Everything you've ever heard about Machu Picchu, the explorer who found it, the empire that built it, the reason they put a city on top of a cloud, what if most of that turned out to be the story we agreed to tell, instead of the story that actually happened? I'm not asking you to believe me. I'm asking you to come look at the evidence with me. Because by the end of this, I think you're going to walk away from Machu Picchu a very different way than you walked in. And this is where we go looking for the truth nobody finished telling. Let's start with what's actually happening right now. Because this isn't folklore. This isn't some legend passed down by a tour guide trying to make your trip more interesting. This is current. This is recent. And it's coming from instruments, not imagination. Researchers working at Machu Picchu have been using electromagnetic detection technology, the same general principle doctors use to look inside a human body without cutting it open. And they've pointed that technology at the ground beneath the citadel's main structure. What they found were voids, hollow spaces, cavities that shouldn't be there if the mountain were simply solid stone all the way down. Now sit with that for a second, because I want you to picture this the way I picture it. You're standing on solid ground your whole life. You assume what's under your feet is just under your feet. Rock, dirt, nothing waiting. And then someone tells you no, there are rooms down there. Sealed rooms. And they've been sealed since before your country, my country, any of our countries existed. That changes how a place feels under your boots. Here's where it gets harder to dismiss. The leading theory, and I want to be honest with you, it is a theory, not a confirmed fact, and I'll come back to that in a moment, is that these could be royal tombs, undisturbed, possibly holding remains, possibly holding objects belonging to rulers of the old Inca capital at Cusco. Tombs that were never found by colonial looters, never found by treasure hunters, never found by anyone, because nobody knew there was anything down there to find. Think about what that actually means. For 500 years, while empires rose, while wars were fought, while entire civilizations on the other side of the planet were born and collapsed, something in that mountain just waited, untouched, not because it was protected by guards or walls, but because it was protected by being invisible. There's a kind of dignity in that, isn't there? A silence that nobody managed to interrupt. Now, I told you I'd come back to the honesty part, so let's do that right now, because I'm not interested in selling you a mystery that falls apart the moment you ask a real question. As of right now, nobody has physically excavated these chambers. And that's not because archaeologists lack the will or the curiosity. Believe me, there is no shortage of people who would love nothing more than to be the one who opens that door. It's because Machu Picchu sits directly on top of two geological fault lines. The mountain is, quite literally, holding itself together in a delicate balance that took 5 centuries to settle into. Start digging in the wrong place, and you're not uncovering history. You might be destabilizing the very ground that's kept this place standing since before Columbus crossed the Atlantic. So the scientific community is left in this strange, almost unbearable position. They know something is there. They have a very good idea of where, and they have made the deliberate choice not to look. Not yet. Maybe not for a long time. If you've ever known something was true, but had to wait, wait for the right moment, the right tool, the right permission. You understand exactly what that feels like. It's not ignorance, it's restraint. And restraint, when you really think about it, takes more discipline than curiosity does. But here's what convinces me this isn't just wishful thinking dressed up as science. This isn't researchers wanting there to be tombs and then finding evidence to match what they wanted. The physical layout of Machu Picchu itself supports the idea that the Inca built this city with the underground deliberately in mind. Studies of the construction effort at Machu Picchu suggest that an enormous share of the total labor that went into building the citadel, something close to 60% of it, wasn't spent on the parts you see in postcards. It wasn't spent on the terraces, the temples, the walls tourists photograph today. It was spent below the surface, on foundations, on drainage systems, on supporting structures buried under everything else. 60%. Let that number actually land. More than half of everything these people built, they built where no one would ever see it. That is not what a civilization does by accident. You don't accidentally pour the majority of your effort into something invisible. You do that on purpose because what's underneath matters to you as much or more than what's on top. Some researchers believe this underground network wasn't just structural. They believe it may have served a ceremonial purpose. A space connected to ritual, to passage, to the spiritual world the Inca believed existed just beneath the one we walk on. I don't know about you, but there's something almost unbearably human about that idea. We build our monuments to be seen. They built theirs to be felt, by the few who knew, by the ones who were meant to know, while the rest of the structure simply stood there in plain sight, keeping its secret in the open air. So here's where that leaves us, just 6 minutes into this. We already know that the place tourists walk through, the place that ends up on calendars and coffee mugs and bucket lists, is sitting on top of something we have detected but never seen. Something the Inca may have built specifically to be hidden. Something modern science is choosing, very deliberately, to leave alone. And if that's true, if there are chambers under the most studied archaeological site on the continent that nobody has ever opened, I think it's worth asking a much bigger, much more uncomfortable question. What else about this place have we simply gotten wrong? Because the man history credits with finding Machu Picchu in the first place? That story has a few problems of its own. And once you hear them, you may never look at that famous photograph, the one of him standing at the entrance in 1911, the same way again. Here's a name you've probably heard, even if you've never given it much thought: Hiram Bingham. If you grew up anywhere near a textbook, an encyclopedia, or even just a documentary playing in the background on a Sunday afternoon, you've likely absorbed the basic shape of this story without ever questioning it. American explorer. 1911. Stumbles onto a lost city in the clouds. The world gasps. History gets rewritten. It's a wonderful story. It has the shape of a movie, doesn't it? A man, alone with his ambition, pushing through unmapped jungle, and then, there it is. The lost city, waiting for him like it had been waiting just for him. I want you to enjoy that image for one more second, because we're about to take it apart. Bingham was a professor at Yale, and here's the detail most retellings leave out entirely. He wasn't even looking for Machu Picchu. He was searching for a different city altogether, Vilcabamba, the last refuge of the Inca after the Spanish invasion shattered their empire. Bingham spent years, and frankly the better part of his professional life, insisting that the place he'd found and Vilcabamba were one and the same. He held on to that belief until the day he died in 1956. It wasn't disproven until after he was already gone, which means the man most credit with discovering Machu Picchu never actually understood what he'd found while he was alive to enjoy it. There's something almost tragic in that, if you sit with it. To spend a lifetime certain you'd solved one mystery, only to have history quietly correct you after you're no longer around to hear it. But the bigger problem with the Bingham story isn't what he misunderstood. It's what and who got left out entirely. Bingham didn't wander up that mountain alone, guided by instinct and a good map. He was led there. A local farmer named Melchor Arteaga brought him to the site. Bingham didn't find Machu Picchu through brilliance or grit. He found it because a man who actually lived in that region took him by the hand, so to speak, and showed him. And even that isn't where the story really begins. There is a name carved into one of the stone walls at Machu Picchu, a name that's been there since before Bingham was even born, to the family that would one day send him to Peru. Agustin Lizarraga, a Peruvian farmer, signed that wall a full decade before Bingham's famous arrival in 1911. 10 years. He didn't just visit, he left his mark, the way people have always left their mark when they've been somewhere first. Some historians go even further back. There are accounts suggesting a German explorer named Augusto Burns had already walked those ruins decades earlier, back in 1867, more than 40 years before the date your history book probably gave you. And underneath all of that, underneath Bingham, underneath Lizarraga, underneath every name we can attach a date to, there were the people who never needed to discover anything at all. The indigenous communities living in that region. They knew Machu Picchu was there. They'd known for generations. It was never lost to them. It was only ever lost to people who weren't from there in the first place. So let's actually sit with what that means, because I think we breeze past this too quickly in most versions of this story. Discovery, in the way we've always used that word for places like this, has never really meant the first human being to see it. It's meant something much narrower and much more revealing. The first person from the part of the world that gets to write the history books to see it. Machu Picchu wasn't a secret. It was simply somebody else's home, somebody else's sacred ground, until a man with a Yale affiliation and a magazine deal walked up to it, and the rest of the world decided that's when it started counting. I don't say that to take anything away from Bingham's genuine contribution. He absolutely brought this place to global attention, and that mattered. But there's a difference between bringing something to the world's attention and being the first human being to lay eyes on it. We've spent over a century conflating the two. And once you start asking who actually got there first, the entire idea of a man finding a lost city starts to look a little different. Less like an adventure story, more like a story about who historically gets remembered and who doesn't. Here's where it gets even more complicated, and frankly, where the story stops being just historical curiosity and starts becoming something closer to a genuine grievance. When Bingham left Peru, he didn't leave empty-handed. With Yale's backing, he brought roughly 30,000 artifacts back to the United States. Pottery, tools, human remains, pieces of a civilization, crated up and shipped across an ocean. What followed was not a quick resolution. It was a dispute that stretched on for nearly a century. Peru maintained these objects had only ever been loaned, a temporary arrangement for study, never a transfer of ownership. Yale, for the better part of 100 years, held its ground that the items were rightfully theirs. 100 years. Think about that timeline against a human life. Children were born, grew old, and died during that dispute. It wasn't resolved until 2011, when Yale finally agreed to return more than 5,000 of those items to Peru. And I think that detail belongs at the center of this whole conversation, not at the edges of it, because it raises a question that has nothing to do with archaeology and everything to do with something much more personal. Who actually owns the story of a people when the physical evidence of their own ancestors spends 100 years sitting in drawers and display cases on another continent? I don't think there's a clean answer to that. I'm not sure there's supposed to be one, but I think it's worth carrying with you, because the next part of this story, the part where we try to figure out what this place was actually built for, runs into that exact same problem over and over again. We are, all of us, trying to understand a civilization using fragments that other people decided were worth keeping. Now we get to the question that should have been simple, and somehow, after more than a century of study, still isn't. What was Machu Picchu actually for? You'd think by now we'd know. We've had drones flying over it. We've had archaeologists spending entire careers walking its terraces. We've had more documentaries, more books, more theories than almost any other site on the planet. And yet, if you put 3 respected experts in a room and asked them that one question, you would not get one answer. You'd get 3, maybe 4. And here's the reason, the real reason underneath all of it. The Inca never wrote any of it down. Not a journal, not a letter, not a single carved inscription saying, "This is why we built this, and this is what we used it for." Everything we think we know is a reconstruction, built from stone, from bone, from soil samples, from the careful, patient work of people trying to read a story with most of its pages missing. So let's walk through what they've pieced together, not as a list of facts to memorize, as a kind of trial, competing explanations, each one with real evidence behind it, none of them with a verdict. The first theory is probably the one you already have somewhere in the back of your mind. Machu Picchu as a royal retreat, built around 1420 to 1450, under the order of the Inca Emperor Pachacutec, as a place of rest. A retreat for the man at the very top of an empire, somewhere he could receive dignitaries, somewhere removed from the noise and weight of running a civilization. There's something almost relatable about that, isn't there? Even an emperor, even someone with absolute power over an empire that stretched across mountains and deserts, needed somewhere to get away. Somewhere high enough, quiet enough, far enough from everything that he could simply exist for a while without the crown pressing down on him. But then there's a second theory, and this one points in an entirely different direction. Not a retreat at all, a temple. A religious and ceremonial center built with extraordinary precision around the movement of the sun. The evidence for this one is carved directly into the stone. There's a structure at the heart of the citadel called the Intihuatana, and it appears to function almost like a solar clock, allowing the Inca to track solstices and equinoxes with remarkable accuracy. On the winter solstice specifically, the sun rises at a precise point that sends light directly into the temple of the sun. Not close, not approximately, precisely. And it goes further than that. There's a rock formation shaped almost like an arrow at the top of Huayna Picchu, the mountain that towers behind the citadel in every postcard photo you've ever seen. And that formation appears to point, through the Intihuatana stone itself, directly toward Mount Salcante, one of the most sacred peaks in the entire Inca spiritual world. Now stop and think about the scale of what that would require. To design a city, not a small shrine, an entire city, where the architecture itself is calibrated to the heavens, where a mountain hundreds of miles away becomes part of the blueprint. That's not guesswork. That's not coincidence repeated by accident. That requires astronomical knowledge passed down with the same seriousness we'd give engineering today. And then there's a third theory, quieter than the other two, less mystical, but in some ways more unsettling. Machu Picchu as an administrative outpost, a center of economic control over a newly conquered region, tied to the empire's expansion toward the Amazon. Not a retreat, not a temple, a government office essentially, just built in stone on a mountaintop instead of in a city center. If that's true, then everything tourists feel when they stand at that overlook, the awe, the sense of something sacred, might be projection, might be us, centuries later, looking for spirituality in what was, at least in part, simply infrastructure, bureaucracy with a better view than anything we have today. Here's what I find genuinely remarkable about all three of these theories. None of them cancel the others out. A royal retreat could also be a temple. A temple could also serve an administrative function. The Inca, as far as we can tell, didn't separate the sacred from the practical the way we tend to. Religion wasn't a department. It was woven through everything, through agriculture, through governance, through where you chose to put a city in the clouds. So when historians argue about which theory is correct, I think they might be asking the wrong kind of question. Maybe the honest answer isn't which one. Maybe it's all of them at once, in ways we no longer have the language to fully separate. What stays with me most, though, is this. 500 years later, with everything modern science can throw at this question, and we still don't have consensus. The smartest people who've ever studied this place, people who've devoted entire careers to it, simply disagree. Not about minor details, about the fundamental purpose of the place, and maybe that should bother us more than it does. We like answers. We like a place for everything, a reason for everything, a single sentence that wraps a mystery up and lets us move on. Machu Picchu refuses to give us that. It just sits there, 5 centuries old, letting the experts argue and giving up nothing. I think there's something almost humbling in that. A reminder that not every question, even one asked by brilliant people for over 100 years, comes with a guaranteed answer. But if we can't agree on why they built it, the next question is even harder. Because once you look closely at how they built it, we don't know starts to feel like an understatement. Let's talk about the stones for a minute. Because I think we've all seen the photographs so many times that we've stopped actually looking at them. Some of the granite blocks used to build Machu Picchu weigh more than 50 tons. 50 tons. To put that in some kind of perspective, that's heavier than a fully loaded semi-truck. Heavier than most of the construction equipment we'd use today to move something that size. And these weren't found sitting conveniently at the building site. They were quarried, cut from rock, kilometers away, and somehow transported up the side of a mountain to an elevation where the air itself gets thin enough to make simple walking difficult. We genuinely do not know with full certainty how they did that. Not we have a vague idea. We don't know. There are theories, log rollers, ramps, sheer manpower in numbers we can barely imagine, but no definitive answer, just stone, sitting exactly where it's been sitting for 500 years, refusing to explain itself. And the transportation isn't even the part that should really stop you in your tracks. It's what happened once those stones arrived. These blocks were cut and fitted together with such precision that you cannot slide a credit card into the seam between them. No mortar, no filler, no adhesive holding anything together, just stone against stone, shaped so exactly that gravity and friction alone have kept these walls standing since before a single brick of most modern buildings was ever laid. Think about what kind of patience that requires. What kind of standard you'd have to hold yourself to, generation after generation, to cut stone with that level of precision using nothing but the tools available 500 years ago. We talk a lot today about craftsmanship, about attention to detail, and then you stand in front of a wall like this, and every modern definition of those words suddenly feels a little smaller. Here's something most people never get told, and it's the part that turns this from impressive into something closer to humbling. That construction technique, stones cut to fit without mortar, isn't just beautiful, it's not decoration. It's survival engineering, and it's been quietly doing its job for half a millennium. Peru sits in one of the most seismically active regions on Earth. Machu Picchu itself was built directly across two geological fault lines, not despite the risk, but apparently with full awareness of it. And here's what happens when an earthquake hits a wall built this way. The stones move. They shift slightly, absorbing the shock, and then they settle right back into place. Architects studying this today call it dancing. The wall flexes instead of breaking. Without that specific method, without that exact precision, most of what still stands at Machu Picchu would have collapsed centuries ago. We're not looking at ruins that survived by luck. We're looking at ruins that survived because someone, 500 years before seismology was a science, understood something about how the Earth moves and built accordingly. I want you to sit with that for a moment because I think it deserves more than a passing nod. We tend to imagine ancient civilizations as primitive, capable of effort, maybe even brute strength, but not real engineering, not real foresight. And then you find out they were designing earthquake-resistant architecture before the word earthquake-resistant existed in any language on Earth. There's one more detail here, and it's smaller. Almost easy to miss, but once you see it, you won't forget it. On the mountain Huayna Picchu, the peak that rises behind the citadel in every classic photograph, there's a natural rock formation that, from the right angle, appears to form the profile of a human face. A nose, a mouth, a forehead tilted upward, as if looking toward the sky. It's most visible in May, June, or July, in the late afternoon, when the light hits it just right. And from another angle, on that same mountainside, people have identified what looks like a second figure. A sleeping woman, carved by nothing but wind and time and the slow patience of geology, which fits, in a strange way, with how the Inca understood the world. They believed deeply in duality, male and female, sun and shadow, the visible and the hidden, two halves of every truth. I don't know if that formation was intentional or if it's simply our minds doing what human minds have always done, finding faces in places where there are none. But either way, there's something poetic about it. A mountain that may have been watching the people who built beneath it the entire time they were building. So here's where this leaves us. More than 30 minutes into a story most people thought they already knew. We've got chambers underground that nobody has dared to open. A discovery story that gives credit to a man who wasn't first, wasn't even looking for this place, and never lived to see his own theory disproven. A purpose that the smartest people alive still can't agree on. An engineering so precise, so deliberate, that it's still outperforming earthquakes 5 centuries later. And we haven't even gotten to the strangest part yet. Because for all of this, the genius, the scale, the sheer audacity of building a city in the clouds, there's one question that towers over everything else. One question that, after 500 years, we still cannot answer with any real confidence. Why did they leave? Before I go any further into this, and I promise we're getting to the part of the story that I think is the hardest one to sit with, if you've made it this far with me, I just want to say something directly to you. You've stuck around for over half an hour on a topic most people think they already know everything about. That tells me something about you. It tells me you're not someone who's satisfied with the easy version of a story. So if that's who you are, I genuinely love for you to subscribe and join us here every day. We dig into the parts of history that get left out, not because they're hidden on purpose, but because the easy version is just faster to tell. You deserve the slower version, the true one. All right, let's go back in. Because everything we've covered so far, the hidden chambers, the disputed discovery, the unresolved purpose, the impossible engineering, all of it eventually runs into one final wall. And this might be the strangest part of the entire story, because it's not about what the Inca built, it's about what they didn't do. They didn't get conquered here. They didn't get destroyed here. Machu Picchu was never found by the Spanish. There's no evidence of battle, no evidence of fire, no evidence of an enemy breaking through and tearing the place apart, which is exactly why it's still standing in such remarkable condition today. Nobody ever came to wreck it. Sit with that for a second, because it's not what you'd expect from the history of this entire region. The Spanish conquest of the Inca Empire was brutal. Cities fell, rulers were captured and executed. An entire civilization was dismantled within a matter of decades. And yet this place, this specific, extraordinary mountaintop city, simply continued to exist, untouched by any of it, until at some point, the people who lived there packed up and walked away. Not driven out, not burned out. They just left. That should unsettle you a little. We're used to ruins telling us a story of violence. A city falls, and you can read the destruction in the rubble. Machu Picchu doesn't give us that. It gives us something quieter and, honestly, something harder to make peace with. A city that was simply, deliberately abandoned, fully intact, and never reoccupied. So what actually happened? One leading theory points to disease. We know smallpox and other illnesses brought by European contact didn't wait for face-to-face encounters to spread. They moved ahead of the conquistadors themselves, traveling along trade routes and family networks faster than any army could march. It's entirely possible that by the time Spanish forces were still hundreds of miles away, sickness had already swept through this region, taking enough of the population that the city Pachacutec built simply couldn't function anymore. Not destroyed, just emptied. There's something almost unbearably sad about that version of events, if you let yourself actually picture it. Not soldiers, not fire, just illness moving quietly through a place this beautiful, this carefully engineered, this spiritually significant, and the people who understood every inch of it having no defense against something they couldn't even see coming. A second theory points somewhere else entirely, not to the people living at Machu Picchu, but to the empire surrounding them. When the Spanish captured the Inca emperor and the entire political structure of the empire began to collapse, a place like Machu Picchu may have simply lost its reason to exist. If this city functioned as an administrative center, a religious site, a royal retreat, all of those roles depended on there being an empire on the other end of them, an emperor to retreat to, a government to administer for, a religious order with the authority and resources to keep it running. Take the empire away, and maybe the city doesn't need to be destroyed at all. It just stops mattering. The people serving those functions have nowhere left to serve, and slowly, deliberately, they walk down the mountain and don't come back. I find that version almost more haunting than the disease theory, if I'm honest with you. because it's not a story about a tragedy striking a place. It's a story about a place simply running out of purpose, about an entire city built with extraordinary precision and intention, becoming unnecessary almost overnight through events that happened hundreds of miles away that the city itself had no part in. Either way, disease or collapse, or some combination, the historical record will probably never fully untangle. The result is the same. A city this advanced, this deliberate, this sacred to the people who built it, was simply left standing, whole, undisturbed, waiting in silence for 400 years before anyone from outside that world walked back up that mountain. There's a phrase I keep coming back to whenever I think about this part of the story. The silence of those stones still holds the answer to why something this extraordinary was left behind so suddenly, so completely. I don't think we're meant to solve that. I think we're meant to sit with it. Because if a civilization capable of earthquake-proof architecture, of astronomical precision, of building cities in places that shouldn't logically support a city at all, if a civilization that advanced could simply vanish from a place like this, almost without a trace of why, what does that tell you about how fragile even our most permanent-looking achievements actually are? So let's bring this all the way back to where we started. There's something underneath Machu Picchu that we've detected but never seen. Sealed chambers that science has chosen, deliberately, not to open. There's a discovery story that gives credit to a man who wasn't first, who wasn't even looking for this place, and who spent his entire life certain of a theory that turned out to be wrong. There's a purpose to this city that the most qualified people on Earth still can't agree on, after more than a century of trying. There's engineering so precise, so deliberately built to survive earthquakes, that it's still outperforming modern construction 500 years later. And there's an ending, a quiet, intact, unexplained ending that we may never fully understand. 5 separate mysteries, 5 separate walls we've run into, and not one of them has a confirmed answer. I think that's worth sitting with for a moment, because of what it says about this place, and honestly, about us. Machu Picchu is one of the most visited, most photographed, most documented locations on the entire planet. Millions of people have stood at that overlook and taken the exact same picture everyone else takes. And yet, for all of that attention, all of that tourism, all of that research, all of those documentaries, it might be one of the least understood places in human history. We've mapped every visible inch of it. We still don't know what's underneath it. We know roughly when it was built. We still don't agree on why. We know how it survived earthquakes. We still don't fully know how they built it in the first place. We know it was abandoned. We still don't know, with any certainty, what made the people who built it walk away. That's not a small gap between what we've seen and what we understand. That's the entire distance between a postcard and the truth. And I think that's the part of this story that deserves to stay with you longer than any single fact I've given you tonight. Not the 50-ton stones, not the sealed chambers, not even the 100-year dispute over who owns the past. What deserves to stay with you is this. We built our entire understanding of one of history's great civilizations on the parts of their story that happened to survive. And we still have no idea how much of the real story simply never made it to us at all. So here's a question I'll leave you with, and I genuinely like to know your answer. Out of everything we walked through tonight, the royal retreat, the temple to the sun, the administrative outpost, which one do you believe? Which version of this place feels true to you? There's no right answer. The experts still don't have one, but I'd like to hear yours. If this is where the story ends for you tonight, I want to ask you for something small. Subscribe so you don't miss what we go looking for next. And if there's someone in your life, a friend, a spouse, someone you'd actually want to sit across from and talk about something like this, send this to 5 of them. Not because I'm asking you to help a channel grow, because stories like this one are better when they're shared out loud with someone over coffee, the way they were always meant to be told. Leave a comment and tell me honestly what struck you most tonight, and tell me where you want us to go next. We're not finished looking, not even close.